So, hi, yes, thank you.
What's your name? Who are you?
Thank you. Whoever gave Steven a seat in the front, thank you. So, yes. So, I'm Sawyer, and this is the talk about 5.28. And there was a nice title for this, where it's like, where are we, where are we going, what does the future hold? And I made that up. So, it's just 5.28, that's the name. And I usually start these talking about what happened before, whatever version I'm talking about, because I think that Perl has a lot to offer, but we don't always know it. And sometimes if we know it, we don't always remember it. I think it's very important that we kind of iterate over the things that we have that are really worthwhile, that are really good to share with others. So I do intend to go over things that are prior to 5.28, but I thought maybe we could make it a bit more interesting this time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to present to you something, and then I'm going to ask which version it is. And whoever wins gets something from Steven over there. So, and you can pick whatever it is that you want, that's fine. Right, so you can get a napkin, you get 2 napkins, I mean, depends on how much you want. So, okay. So the first thing that I'm going to show is something called a fold case. Whenever we want to compare things, I don't know if you can see this, I'm sorry, this is terrible. I really dim the lights. Did not realize this. Can we dim the lights a little bit? Is that all right? Let's see if that works. So the new version of Perl has better syntax highlighting and yeah, larger font. I don't know. Contrast. I could probably make the font a bit bigger. You know what? I mean, this is really the best time to do this, but I'm going to try and just resize the font and see if I can get that working. So yeah, let's do font size 80 EM and see if this works. No, that's probably not better. And this? No, it's still size. Alright, I'm sorry. We're going to have to make some effort. If you're sitting in the back and you can't see it, I think it would just be easier if you move forward than if I just spend 10 minutes to revise this. So, okay. One of the things that we want to do is compare strings. And kind of the go-to pattern that we have is that we just lowercase both of them and we compare them. And if they're the same, they're the same. Except that doesn't really work for Unicode. You can try that with uppercase. That, again, will not work because of Unicode. So, what can we do? What you could do is simply change to using the Regex engine, because the Regex engine is Unicode aware. So if you use it on character, it goes, oh, Unicode, I know this. So what we do is simply quote that, / Q is for quoting, / E is for ending the quote, and then we use the caret and the / Z to anchor them, so it's a complete one, and then of course the I modifier for whether it's case-insensitive or not. And that's the right way, but that's also kind of annoying. So one other thing that we could do is just use the fold case. And the fold case is kind of like uppercase or lowercase, except it's not for up or down, it's just to normalize them so you could compare them. It's really nice. So this feature, what version did it come in to play? What was that? 5.16? You are right, sir. See Steven at the end for a napkin. Right, good. All right, key value slices. I like key value slices. I like slices in general. So first, normal slices. You have an array and it has a bunch of stuff. And what you do is you grab more than one item. And that I really like slices because they explain a core tenet of the syntax of Perl, which is sigils, and how sigils change based on what you're accessing. And it's something that when we explain it to people, it's still confusing because you only work with one thing at a time. So you only access one item of the array. You only access one item of the hash and stuff like that. And for people who are starting, this doesn't make any sense. So usually when I teach someone, I always show, well, you know what, you can access more than one thing. What if I change the sigil into multiples with an at? Well, now I can access more than one thing, and that's a slice. So if I just change this to use the at, and then I can provide multiple indices, and then it can receive multiple values, then you copy them back, and it's fairly simple. And I really like this. If anyone's wondering, if you explicitly give one index, Perl will warn you. All right, same happens for a range, obviously, and same thing happens for a hash. So instead of the symbol for the %, we can use an @ and then we can use 2 values. We can retrieve 2 values. So we just put that, 2 keys and 2 values. But what happens if we want the key and the value? So now we have key value slices. And those allow us to take this multiple access to multiple values of the hash, and instead of the @ we can use a hash, the %, and then we just give 2 indices, and then receive a subset of the hash. I love this feature so much, so I give 2 keys and then I get keys and values. It's really great. And it also works in arrays. So I can change the array to access the array as a subset of it and provide 3 indices, and it will return a list. It actually returns the list, so you could apply it to an array, you could apply it to a hash, and now you get the indices and the values. So this will work for a hash as well. It's really nice. So key value slices. Which version did this come in? 526, 520. Do we have anyone going about 526? No? Okay. But it was a trick. It was a trick. 520. Yes. Very good. Next, captured data variables. So this is another pattern that I happen to have a lot. I'll use multiple captures and then I have to apply them, because you always apply them to a variable. You're not going to use $, because that might be written by another regex capture, which might happen from a function you're calling and you have no idea. So it's just like you do a shift, just use this too. And then you have to check them. So, well, first, actually, one thing that I do like to mention is that you could do this instead. So instead of applying $1, 2, and 3, you can just apply a capture directly. But now you have to check them. This is the first thing that I tend to see people do. They check if not this, or if not that, or if not. I tend to write it this way instead, so I need to have this, this, and this. And if I don't have it, croak. And I think this kind of shows how Perl can be written as spoken, rather than just like a computer language that is very restricted. So, what happens if one of them is optional? So we have this question mark here, and suddenly we need to normalize, get a default value, etc., and check it again. So there's a new thing that we have, which is the data capture variables, and they allow you to have like this array that represents all of these. And you can either apply from it, or you could use that directly, and it's really nice. And there's also the other variables to replace the %+, %-. If you don't know what it is, does anyone know what they are? Larry, not you, sorry. Does anyone else know what they are? Right, I was kind of hoping for hands, but it's one person, so I'll take it. So, because you don't know what they are, you also don't have to worry about it. So, what version did they come in? 510, 526. They're written by Eve, kind of near the end of the development cycle. It was like, oh, this is kind of cool. All right. Postfix dereferencing. I love postfix dereferencing. I think it's Rick's favorite feature as well. So, we have an array reference, and we need to dereference it by adding another sigil of what it represents. And I don't like it written that way. I have to admit, whenever I see someone that I worked with that is new, I always say, do not write it this way, because as soon as it's a longer expression, you have to then figure out where to put it and to wrap it again. So, my favorite thing is just to wrap it at the beginning, and then I always kind of consistently. I've had a situation where it was scalar reference, and someone said, I don't see the problem, and then I said, well, but there's $2 there. And he said, no, there isn't. That there aren't $2 there. So I think it kind of explains why this is hard to notice sometimes when you look at a lot of code. So with wrapping, it's definitely easier. One other thing that we can do now with postfix deref is simply to deref this, and the way that I read it is give me the array, give me all of the array that is there. So the star for me is like all of it. So the entire array that it references. And this plays out really nicely when we have more complicated data structures. So in this case, we dereference, and we can just, instead of wrapping the way we used to, we kind of write and write and write and then wrap it. Instead, what we can do is just continue forward and say, just give me all of it. The entire array that this represents. This is very readable. In this case, this is working with a hash reference, so we dereference, and we just keep writing, give me the hash, and we'll run the keys of that. So this is pretty cool. What version did it come in?
514.
For a napkin. 5 what?
514.
514? 520. All right, Dave, you lose a napkin. David. All right. Okay. So now current sub. I love current sub because I write a lot of callback-based and event-based programming and stuff like that. I really like asynchronous programming, and I use stuff like that all the time. So I gave this as a task for someone today, and he actually used it. It appeared on his computer while he was transitioning to show something else. So we have a function, and this function just prints a tree, and it takes a node, and it walks to the left, it prints what it has, and walks to the right, and there's no specific algorithm here in mind. And if you want to have it as a function pointer, like as a code ref, all we do is just put it in a sub, and that's it. Except, can anyone spot the problem?
Scope.
Scope. Yeah, the problem is, I don't know if you see this, but we're defining the function, and we're using it. So we're defining the use of it while we're defining it. So Perl doesn't know what it is yet. So the solution to this, and it's recommended in various other places, you just define it first and then you give it value, which is really nice. This is also the solution that someone gave me today. And I will not name names. Looking at you. Okay, so the problem with this, does anyone know what the problem with this is?
Ugly.
What was that?
Ugly.
It's ugly? Okay, I'll take that.
I know, but memory.
Dave, you know?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's got a memory link that makes more.
Correct.
Smart when you use it because you can tell.
It makes you smug when you use it, yes, thank you. So this actually is a problem. You can see by the output here, there's a closure, let's call it A, there's a function pointer, it's called B, and then B actually then points to A because it kind of wraps around itself, and this is actually a detected memory leak by using a module. I think it's LDS's module. So, I should say LDS here is not what LDS usually means here. I mean Lincoln D. Stein or CGIP, I mean, is a module that tests for memory leaks. Okay. So, a different way to write it would be to use, to weaken it. So, you can use scalar util, weaken, and then you can weaken it into another one, and then you can use that one. Except, you cannot weaken something that is not a reference, because there is no count to the reference, so that doesn't work either. So okay, we get into this like really crazy callback situation because the actual solution for this is, I'm just gonna remove some things here. It's this, and it's a function, it's a code, it's a, sorry?
Fixed point combinator.
Fixed point combinator. Stephen, you should do this. So it's basically a callback that receives a callback that is actually itself, and when it calls itself with itself, and yeah, so yeah, and that's what I wrote during Dave's talk. Sorry, Dave. Okay, so yeah, that's kind of. Does anyone fully understand this? Does anyone not fully understand this? Okay, that's good. You're all very brave, and I appreciate that. So you could just use something else. So instead of all these crazy stuff, you can just use current sub, and now you have underscores, sub underscores, and that will always point to the current running subroutine. You're welcome. That's it. Super simple. And I love this. So when was it introduced? This super awesome feature you can have for free. 14, 22, this was 16. Nice, all right, okay. So Amigo, so Amigo support at some point was dropped, and it was reinstated. I don't remember who the person was that complained and was like, I need this. My production code is running on this, and I can't upgrade. So when was it reintroduced? Does anyone know? Because you all follow Amigo OS news, right? I mean, come on. That was okay, 5.24. So, Unicode 8. Unicode 8 specifically is not the thing that I'm happy about. What I'm happy about is all of the diversity system that Unicode 8 provided, and I give this example where you can just take, this is 0 with joiner, and we have this heart, and we concatenate this heart with what's called a variation selector, which is a color. Yes. Which color is 16? Does anyone know? Red. Come on, you don't have this printed?
Red. Black.
Red. Because what other color would you give a heart? Okay, never mind. Tough audience. Okay, so you can take characters and you can mix all of them together with a 0 with joiner, and you can create one Unicode character by putting together other Unicode characters. And it's really awesome. It creates this thing. And I've said this before, and it's still the state that my terminal is not it doesn't have enough features to represent what my old language can do. And it's very frustrating that Perl is too new for this. So it has this diversity system. I really like this. It also added skin tone colors, so you could apply skin tone, and then you could do stuff like this. The same thing with other characters, and it's really nice. This is another concatenation. Here is just an interpolation of string, but it's the same thing. And I really like this. So when was the diversity system introduced into Unicode? And the same year we actually got it into Perl. Well, the next version of Perl. 24. Good job, Dave. Here's a free Perl download. Okay. So, all right. Subroutine signatures. Subroutine signatures, yeah. So they were added a while ago. I want to share what we have in subroutine signatures. This is the first version of it that was introduced. Actually, you had variables, and you were able to have placeholders, and you were able to set default values, and you were able to actually set a value using a different variable and increment it even though it's outside. You could even use variables that are actually only declared in the signature. You could do all these things, other placeholders or hashes, whatever. So when were they introduced?
522.
522, 526, 520. Who said 520? John, you get to edit Perl.com. So, Regex set operations. I really like this. You're going to see something about this later. So, this is a Regex that actually creates a very specific thing. It requires a digit of either tie or Laotian. Am I saying this correctly? I want to say Laotian, but I think it's Laotian. Laotian. Thank you. So it takes those two scripts and says, I want a digit of that, which is really precise, and I love this. This says, I want a word character, but not the lowercase ones, which is really cool. So, set operations when?
18.
18, good job. Version control markers. So, when you had this before, this change, it actually confused it with a different deprecated feature. And now it actually says, wait a minute, I'm not going to even run this. I'm going to stop while I'm compiling this. I'm going to stop the compilation. You're trying to have two versions here and you need to resolve this. This was done in 26. And the XX, another favorite. So let's say that we have these ranges and we have all these characters and we can expand them because this is Perl and we have the best, most readable regular expressions. But that's not readable enough, so we now have XX, and with XX we expand it even further. So now you can clearly see it's D to E, G to I, 3 to 7, then we can expand these and you can see that each character separately, it's really nice. So when were they added? 526, correct. All right, multi-deref, when we're getting to the heavy stuff. So I used to give this example where we have an array ref, and then there's something in it, and there's a hash ref, and a hash ref, and a hash ref, and an array ref, and a hash ref, and an array ref, and two hash refs, because that's how children's songs go. And this is what it looks like when Perl tries to compile it. Well, it succeeds at compiling, I should say. It doesn't just try. And this is what it compiles it as. I'm going to remove some cruft, because there are some stuff that are not specifically relevant to the data structure. There we go. Now, in this new version, it looks like this. And I'm going to remove the cruft. There we go. Which version introduced this multi-deref op, which basically takes a bunch of dereferences and makes one single operation. 524. So we've had it since then. And then the heredocs, I like this. This is my pattern. I have a help and exit function, and I send it like an optional error message in case I have any. And then I print the help. And then I always get confused between which way I always have to indent it back, and then after I put the end, I have to indent that back, and it's very frustrating. But if you just put a twist on that, suddenly you can indent it forward wherever you like. And this was introduced in the latest version. So, now we hit 528. So now that you remember all these things, and you can share how awesome the language already is, let's talk about some things that we're going to get now. But before I do this, I want to talk about who made 5.28. There were a lot of people involved in this. There's a script that we have in Bleed, in the core, and we just run it on 2 different tags, and it gives us a list of every single person involved in this release, as far as we know from their commits. Some of them are actually here. This includes Abigail, and James Keenan, and Nick Costin, and Carl Williamson, and John Anderson, and Todd Ronaldo, and Nicolas. And actually, I'm going to do something that I don't normally do, not just at my talks, but in general, is let someone else speak. So I'm going to bring Nicolas one sec, because we wanted to do something special today, just a little bit.
So I'm here today, right now in front of you, to say a special thank you to 2 of our attendees. They have stopped counting the number of YAPC or TPC or whatever you call them they went to. But both of them are proactive members of P5P, but also CPAN. They are pushing the community up by helping us set up quality standard to reach our goal, or should I say our release. They are both retired and play with Perl for fun during their free time. On behalf of the Perl Foundation, I would like to offer them a small gift. And by the way, you can still buy some of them. So, please join me in congratulating, in no special order, James Keenan, and also Carl Williamson.
And I'm going to give one big shout out to someone who's been here for, I think he's been at YAPCs more than the YAPCs have occurred. And he's been in P5P longer than Perl has occurred, has existed, and that would be Abigail. Where's Abigail? Right there. Also, thank you very much. Abigail is the driving force behind my sanity. So, all right. He's doing a terrible job, yes. Thank you, Dave. All right. So what's in 5.28? Sorry. So what's in 5.28? We've been here for quite a long time now, and no one knows me. So okay. So first, I want to share my favorite fix that we made in this release, because every time there's like a bunch of stuff that we fix, and some of them are really big and some of them are really small, but there are certain things that I really like, and I love sharing them, and this is one that I really appreciated. Pack and unpack can now handle repeat counts and lengths that exceed 2 billion. Yeah. I mean, it's about time. Okay. But moving on from this. We have some features, not that many, but we do have some. First, we have Unicode 10, which is pretty cool. It added the Bitcoin sign, which I guess is important. I don't know, but hey, you have it now, I mean, finally. We can now do delete on keys and values. So we have those slices, but now you can also do a delete on them, which means you can also retrieve them in the subset. I use delete often, and I use the return value often. So this, I know, is useful. There is something called alphabetic synonyms for regex. So a lot of the regex features that you see, some of them are Dave Mitchell, and some of them are Eve Orton, but quite a lot of them are Carl Williamson over there, and he's just, like, he's retired, he's just playing with stuff, and he's creating these crazy features, and this is one of his. And he basically said, if we take a look at this thing, does anyone know what this is?
I didn't even see it.
So it's in parentheses, you have a question mark, equal, and then a pattern. Right, so this is a positive look ahead, but you don't really know it unless you know it. And now you can replace it with a star PLA colon for positive look ahead. Or, if this is still obscure, you can also just use star positive underscore look ahead. It's far more readable, but that's not enough. So we also have the negative one, so that's the NLA for the negative look ahead. We also have the positive look behind, that's the POB, and positive look behind, and the negative look behind, also there. And one more, does anyone know what the other directive is? Not you, Carl.
PPJ.
All right, no. Anyone else? Anyone else? Bueller? No, okay. It is this one. Does that help? It is a question mark and a greater than.
Independence of atomic?
Independence of expression. Okay. The atomic. Yeah. So, if you don't know what it is, like, I don't either, like, it's fine. But we have it. Oh, it's a real path. Okay. So, script runs was also something that Carl kicked around and he just suggested it, and everyone was like, yeah, that sounds pretty good, and he just wrote it. I think it's pretty sweet. You're going to also see this later on. And this allows you to have, let's say in this case, a digit, but you can make sure that that digit, whatever script it is, it's only from that script. No one can introduce from multiple scripts in the same match. And you can do the same just with *SR instead. This has security implications for the better, and that's kind of where Carl came from. And you can also combine the atomic and the security, the script run, but you can also use it with *ASR, so to have the atomic script run, or atomic _ script _ run. Another thing that we have is that the yada yada operator, it's finally a statement. I don't know how many people remember when it was introduced, it actually had some unintended consequences where you could use it in certain places where you shouldn't have been able to use it. Some examples, you could have done yada 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 and then concatenate something to that. You could have used yada 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 if. So those no longer work. It is strictly a statement. But if you want to do something like the latter, where you do a yada yada if, you could do just a do yada yada if. CentOS 5. This is not a joke. I don't know how many people use CentOS or RHEL and all that. They're kind of, CentOS 5 is not that new. But it is prevalent in Japan, in Asia, and some other areas that are not near us, but it is heavily used. So it is not working again. We now require C89 as a standard for the language. This sounds silly, mainly because we declared that we were doing this in October 1998. So now we are. There have been some performance enhancements, and I think 5.28 is characterized a lot by the performance enhancements it's going to have. The startup overhead for using the \p has been greatly reduced, and it's for most cases, not all of them. The multi-concat opcode. Does anyone know what the multi-concat opcode is? Oh, there are some people. Okay. So I'm sorry to the 3 people because I'm going to explain. So the multi-concat op takes something that is very, very useful and just makes it faster, just like a lot of other stuff that Dave Mitchell does. So let's take a look at what happens without it. In this case, I have an X, and I apply hello, and I apply a dash 10 times, and I apply some value from a hash key, from a hash with a key, and then I apply 30, and all these concatenations where in fact the assignment is also there. And if we look at all of these, this is what the code looks like for the compiler. It does actually, Perl does compile the code into an op tree, which happens before runtime, so it's not a entirely inline interpreter language, no matter what anyone says with air quotes. And if I remove just some of this cruft here and remove some more cruft here, this is basically what it looks like when you can see there are 2 concat operations happening. The assignment is on hello with dashes. What happens with multi-concat? We take this entire thing, I clean it up, and what you can see here is that there is just one concat operation to all of it. So if you can concat a lot of different stuff, or if you use concatenation, I mean, does anyone use concatenation? Yeah, one in the back. Tend to use this, right? It's kind of a big thing. So all of those, no matter how many concatenations you have now, they're kind of all bunched together into one thing. So this gives you the same effect as the multi-deref op for multiple dereferencing. Some more performance stuff. Ref, when you use it in Boolean context, it's now faster because it doesn't have to construct that string of what that ref is. Keys in void and scale context is more efficient. If you compare something, if you run index on something and you compare it to -1, which is a very common pattern, Perl identifies it, recognizes it, and optimizes that. This is also an example when I tell people that when you write in Perl, you shouldn't be writing a different language with a Perl syntax. You should be writing Perl. Because the language optimizes for the constructs that you use. It matters that you speak in that language. Just like if I were to speak my native tongue and I were to use the sentence construct of, say, Dutch, for example, it would be very weird. Because in Dutch, negation sometimes goes at the end. If you're using English, it sounds like you're sarcastic about everything. So this is an example why it's very important to speak in that context. So this is nice. The for loop, similar construct, are now more efficient. As to be true, it's an API function. It's actually also more efficient now. If you call require for something that had already been loaded, it is slightly faster. Pattern matching for ASCII and non-ASCII are significantly faster, except on IPSIDIC. Because, you know, it's not, you'll laugh, but in the Perl Delta it actually says not on IPSIDIC. And some significant Regex performance changes as well. And of course, I mean, if I recall, it was Carl, he had a bit of spare time. He also optimized UTF-8. Why not? So, we did remove some stuff other than everything you care and love. For removing stuff?
Yes, we did planning on removing stuff.
Remove stuff. Okay, great. So, stuff that we're removing. Well, the first thing that we did is actually clean up some of the hashing functions. So Perl uses hashes, hash functions for hashes. And we've cleaned up, there were several that we just decided they're not secure. So what we are keeping, if you are interested in, I think that's interesting and fascinating, SIP hash 2.4, SIP hash 1.3, Zafo 32, used on 32-bit builds, STAT TX 64 builds, and SBox 32 on short strings, which is really interesting to me. So basically when Perl recognizes that this is a string that's 24 characters and under, it actually uses a different hashing which is faster. So it's pretty cool. Locked and unique subroutine attributes, yeah, they're gone. They have been deprecated, 5.12 for the first one, 5.10 for the second one. That's it, we're done, they're gone. Using the \uppercase N and not having anything inside, removed, it was deprecated since 5.24. This is my favorite. The bare heredoc terminator. I don't know how many people know this. The first time I saw this, I thought it was completely something else. What it is that when you use a heredoc and you don't put any terminator at all, it basically says, oh, then you want an empty line. And this actually conflicted with two different features that we had. So, it conflicted with one feature that we wanted to do the indented heredocs, and it was the confusion you got when you had version markers. I actually thought it was this. And this was deprecated in 5. Not 5 something, just 5. Okay. Inherent auto-load for non-methods, deprecated 5.4. Setting the sorting algorithm. Did anyone even know you could change the sorting algorithm? It was done with an underscore. Yes, Liz, I know you know. This has been doing Perl longer than I've been alive.
Since 5.6, or 10.11.
So yes, so we've removed that extra sorting. Use vars, it's what's used when you don't have our, and we've removed this from the core. There are some feature removals. We want to remove this, assigning to $left bracket. It's going to be gone in 5.30. Host name should not accept arguments, and now we're actually making sure it doesn't since 5.32. There's a new warning, and I'm happy Pudge is here. So there's, let's say that we have a variable named pistachio. This is a song in Hebrew, a TV show. And we want to print out the in whatever name's house. And I did not add any syntax highlighting inside it because I want you to guess what it's going to do.
It's going to throw a warning.
It's going to throw a warning. Which version of Perl is going to throw a warning? The one that I just said that we're going to add a warning, or?
It's in an existing version of Perl because I have run into that. So, but in the new version, it's not going to throw the warning anymore.
Opposite. But that was good enough. Okay. You get an inside-out napkin. Okay.
If the variable doesn't exist, you get a single-use warning. In the
yes.
version of Perl.
Okay. I'll take it. So, what actually happens, we assume that this will bring the person's name's house, but it doesn't because, well, you think this is the variable. This is not the variable. the variable is this. And the reason the variable is this is because there was an old package separator that was used, and it was a single quote. And it still exists, and we're not removing it. So this is what Perl thinks you wrote. And I mean, I want to say dope, but I'm actually referring to the module dope. That got shared at a lightning talk. So, but it's also like dope. So now you actually, well, first you could just use a backslash to use the single quote, but you now get a new warning saying old package separator used in string, and if you use agnostics, you get this nice explanation that says, hey, use the old package separator in a variable named inside a double quoted string. This is equivalent to if you meant the former, put a backslash before the apostrophe. Okay, so module updates. Usually I don't share module updates, but I will share now because I think they're kind of important updates. First, bdparse. Is anyone using bdparse? Good. So bdparse, if you have never used it, look it up. Basically, it tells you what Perl understood from the code that it read. So it's like you're feeding Perl stuff, and then Perl spits it back and says, this is what I understood. Which I have to say, without a single emoticon of sarcasm, this is a really good way to communicate with others, where someone tells you something and you can repeat back and say, oh, this is what I understood from you. And then you could say, no. And they could correct themselves, or they could correct you, and then you can explain again until we both understand each other. I actually use this at work, and it's a very good tool. So bdparse gives you that. And I have used this specifically to understand code written by someone in this room, Liz, that I'm not going to mention. Where I didn't understand the code, I had to use bdparse. But one of the things that bdparse will do, by the way, is give you enough parentheses to understand the operator order, which is really useful if you have multiple operators and you don't know the order of it, and there are no parentheses. So we've updated it, now it parses the variable attributes. Storable specifically had a ton of changes to it that are fixes, but it was also released finally to CPAN because CPAN did not have an up-to-date release of it, which meant that you could only get this if you get a new Perl, which is not a really good way to get you to upgrade. File spec had the same problem, and it carries CWD, super useful, so finally released. Devel PPPort is a very important module. Who here does access? Okay, how many of you use Devel PPPort? Right, so if you know what access is, it's basically that layer that connects Perl with C, C++, the underlying levels, and it gives you access to the API and to the data types in Perl. So you can write in much lower level stuff. It's really, really cool. It's kind of scary, but it is really cool. And Devel PPPort actually does two things. I've used it for years and only knew about the first one. The first one is that it creates this file that you can include, and then all of the APIs in Perl, all these functions and macros that we've added to new versions are suddenly available in older versions. So if you write access now and you want to use this new function in 5.28, your module will only work on 5.28. But if you use Devel PPPort, it generates this nice header file in which we backported that macro or function as long as we could, which is often the case, down to older versions. So now it works on 5.10 because we were able to bring it back. I've used this to write refutil to work all the way back to 5.6. I don't know if anyone uses it there, I just thought it would be a nice challenge, but it was mostly possible thanks to this module. The other use case it has, if you run it in your access, it actually gives you tips, which is really nice. And this module is very hard to maintain. The work was done mostly by Matthew Horsfall, and at some point he just said, you know what, I have other things that I really need to address now, so I can't maintain this anymore, or at the moment. And he took a step back, and we wanted to update it. The only problem is that this thing has support down to 5.3. I can't compile 5.3. So there is actually a testing suite that generates all the Perls down to 5.3, and you have to test it on all of them, and no one was able to run it. And it's just really difficult. So the first thing that we did is we moved it to upstream bleed. To move to upstream bleed a module basically means that the responsibility no longer falls on a module author. It falls on the core hackers. And then we update it and we release it to CPAN, which means that there are now more people working on it, and it falls on our responsibility, which I think is much more appropriate for this module. Thanks to Toolchain, we've determined that we are going to drop support for under 5.6. So 5.6.1 and above are supported, everything under, we don't have to worry about it anymore. Sorry, whoever's running 5.3 and 5.5, sorry. Anyone? Okay. Let me go S? No? Okay. All right. And yeah, so a big thank you I want to give to Matthew Horsfall, who was maintaining this.
Morris.
Sorry? And Marcus Morris, yes, who maintained before and helped us with the transition. So, okay, there are a few other things. Yeah. And Matthew usually shows up and then I get to embarrass him, but he's not here today. All right.
I'll do it for you.
Thank you. So, some big ones. There are specifically 3 things I want to talk about. First one is optimization and bugs. Optimizations and bugs. It's a short anecdote that I still carry with me. So in this release cycle, one of our developers found that there's a certain pattern of sorting that had a bug in it. The problem was that Perl had some optimization to not reallocate memory, and that optimization missed a step. And that step could incur variables just removed without you wanting it. And he said, well, I think this is the problem. We should put that step back in. And we looked at it and said, yes, that makes sense. And he put the step back in. And there was one major module that depended on it. And it broke. So we contacted the module author and said, hey, this is broken. You need to not depend on this step being missing. So that module author refused. I'd like to say he refused, but it wasn't just refusal. It had some of the, I mean, people hear a lot that that core development is hard, and that working with people is hard. I can say this was one of my more trying times. And this is some of the communication that I would never want to have with anyone ever alive. And his main comment, if you take away all the other colorful language, was that it was slightly faster without the step. And I mean, it's an argument. An additional argument is maybe no one really depends on this step being there, which is also a fairly good argument that you could make by using those words alone. So he simply refused removing it or fixing his code. That meant that one of the reasons though 5.28 is coming out a month later, only one of those reasons though, is that this module was broken, so many people use it. And what we had to do was reintroduce a bug. And I'm very unhappy about it because this is a bug fix. We clearly know this is a bug. One of the arguments was like, this is on purpose. And the person who wrote the original code said, no, it's a bug. I wrote this. I made a mistake. You need to fix this. And we had to reintroduce a bug. And I'm not happy about this because it's one of the examples where we have to balance between giving you a better Perl in the sense of bug-free and having to argue with a module author because they refuse to cooperate. It's also one of the examples of why communication is so important for us to be able to work. Because otherwise, I think in this respect, users are stuck in between. Because you have the language on one side and you have modules on the other side. And if one breaks the other in any way, which is usually us breaking modules, of course, only communication helps us mediate that and bring it to a solution that doesn't affect you. In this case, we have to give you a bug, and I'm sorry about that. Smartmatch is another thing I want to talk about. Smartmatch, we screwed up with Smartmatch. Smartmatch came in 5.10, and it was not that good. It got significant changes in 5.10.1, which is not the right time even, because that's a maintenance release. It shouldn't have changes like that, but it did, and it was still not good. It was a burden to use and to develop and maintain. So for a very long time, we tried to change that and do something else. We had a lot of ideas in mind. Eventually, we resolved one, and we tried in one of the release cycles for 5.28. The result was really bad, mainly because the keywords that we picked were not good. They were very confusing. So we provided a worse interface, and this was not an improvement. And we reduced Smartmatch fairly, quite a lot, and that also did not actually add anything. So we reverted the next version. There's a blog post that I wrote on Perl.com, and thank you, Devel, for pushing Perl.com. And yes. I'm going to say that we do intend to use that avenue more to communicate with you on what we're doing, and maybe for additional, retrospectives on what we did and where we made mistakes. Smartmatch is definitely one of those. Luckily for you, this was a development cycle. This is why we have it. It didn't reach any production code at any point, and it lasted one release of a development. So it's okay. And subroutine signatures, which is a big topic, because this was tricky. So 5.20 introduced subroutine signatures, and they look like this. You have a function. You could use subroutine attributes before the signature. And then we changed that in 5.22. We basically said, well, this looks better if the signature appears first, right? And then you have the attributes following. So we changed that. And then we reached L value recently. And we realized that L value can actually change something that the signatures need to pick up. And if the attribute appears after, then we broke the order of an existing feature. So we decided to change it back again. And this is where it gets really crappy. So now you get the situation where 5.20, it's before. 5.22, 24, 26, it's after. 5.28 and above, it's before again. But what can we do about it? So I'm sorry this is a situation. But there are some things you can do. Mainly because Matt had some spare time. So Matt was not here and he decided to grace us with code. So what he did was write this thing. It's called Post 5.26 sig fix. And what it does is help change your code to fit the versions that you want to use, including both. So if you have this function, this application, what you do is you can run it with -u for upgrade, -i for in place. You don't have to do it in place, you can just spit it out and you can do it in a different file, but you can do it in place and do a git diff. And it just upgrades to use the right order. You can also downgrade with -d. And if you want it to work on both, you can also -PMC, and then use the PMC functionality to have two implementations, one this way, one that way, and automatically it loads the correct one. So this is pretty cool. If you have servers that are running some this version, some that version, some that version, and you want it to work on all of them, you can use that. If you're just upgrading, you can use one of the first functions. And if you want to shift an entire code base, because it's just a single file, well, Unix. You just run it undefined. So this is pretty sweet, and I want to give, so this is the link for it, there you go. It's trout.meuk/perl/post 5.26 sig fix. I'm sure he will upload it to an even better place soon enough, and maybe we should probably add it to the article for Perl.com once it's out. And a big thank you for Matt for making it easier for everyone. And also Conway wrote PPR, and that's what Matt used, so yeah, that's pretty cool. So, 5.28.0 is out, RC4. We've had RC3 at the conference, we have 5.24, 5.28 RC4 at the conference too. But despite the delay, it's a month delay, I'm sorry about that, we do intend to have 5.28 full done by the time you're home, or at least by the time I'm home. So, what's in the future? No big plans, so far, that I'm aware of. We don't have any specific things that we know we definitely are going to do. They're pretty big. I know we can tell you that we intend to continue to maintain Perl 5. It's a comment that some have been cautious about and worried about, and they want to make that clear. We do have two things that we wish to do. One is we want to add some features to signatures and have some optimizations for it, specifically named parameters, aliasing, a few more, and this is what Dave Mitchell, who worked on signatures, considers complete solution, so he's going to add those. And maybe we'll tackle Smartmatch, but hopefully we'll do it better this time. You can register to Perl 5 porters to read everything, and it is perl5-porters at perl.org. The summaries used to be something unmaintained until yesterday. The summaries are basically every week you get what happened during that week, or every 2 weeks or month, depending on how much time I have. And I've realized, I'm sorry to say, I don't have any more time. So if anyone wants to pick up the Perl 5 summaries, please come talk to me. And that's all the time I have. Thank you very much for listening.